You struggle with getting creative from time to time, and whatever you try, you anyway don't get rid from your block and you don't know why. In this video, I'm going to show you how the way of thinking has a massive impact to our creativity and finally to the quality of our photographs. Hi my friends, very nice to see you. You know, whenever I get asked how I earn my money, I have a quite clear answer. It is something like, I have an IT and marketing company, and beside that, I'm a landscape photography artist. And so it happened, and I think it was already last summer, I was sitting at the doctor's, at the waiting room, and I was waiting for my second vaccine. And you know how things are. I came into conversion with another person, a younger girl with around 20 or something like that. And she heard that it is already the second time for me, and yeah, she had simply some questions. And finally, you know how small talks work, she asked me which job I have and so on, what I'm working. And you know, usually IT and marketing company and photography artist. But before I was able to answer, there came another girl from the doctor store into the waiting room just to take her jacket or something like that before she went home. And it turned out that she was an old classmate of the first girl. And so they started a little conversion. And I mean, what should I say? I was simply not able to listen away, to be honest. They were just 2 meters from me away. And so they were talking about what they were doing now after school and so. And finally, the first girl said something like, "Oh, I work at the theater or at the opera or something like that. It is fantastic. Just the people are totally gaga. You know, artists." And I just thought, oh man. And as that conversion got to the end, and I was still owing her an answer about how I earn my money. I was just a photographer on that day, just a photographer, not a photography artist. Yeah, you know, I prefer to take photographs in an art history way. I feel like an artist, and usually I really stand to that what I am. But on that day, I was quite confused about this reaction against artists. I am one, so are we all really gaga? And one fact is, artists really think in a different way. And this is the reason why they are good in that what they are doing. Thinking like an artist is the key to get a piece of art when you are photographing. So is there a way of thinking like an artist but not appearing crazy to others? Now let's have a look how artists think. Well, how do artists think? And therefore, let's have a look first how normal people think. You know, those who are not gaga. I will break this down to photography afterwards for sure, I promise you. Just let's have a quick look at how we learn to think from our childhood on. And yeah, that's really important. So let's take a simple mathematics example from the ground school. We all know examples like that. Well, I've prepared it here for you. A family Miller has 3 children and they got a little apple tree from their neighbor. It was a young tree, and so the first year there grew just 6 apples on it. How many apples gets each child? And we all know, of course, how we have to solve an example like that. And as obvious it is, let me anyway say it, just to compare it afterwards with something different. Now all we have to do is, we have to divide the number of apples through the number of children, obviously. So 6 apples divided to 3 children are 2 apples for each child. And this is the analytic way of thinking. And we have all learned at school to think exactly in that way. And not just when it's all about to solve a mathematical problem. We think like that in most of our time. And with this way of thinking, we have just one clear starting point and one right result. There is no space for creativity. It is just all about coming from here to here. It could be that there are different ways of how you get there finally, but yeah, I mean, finally it's all about getting exactly there. And when I think back to my time at school, later on a middle or higher school, it was not enough just to get the right result. it was important to calculate it exactly in that way. Our teacher teached us in front, otherwise the example was wrong, although the result was right. And I didn't understand this back then, to be honest, but I understand it today. It is all about getting as efficient as possible to get to our result. Because in some cases there are different ways of how to get to the goal. And teachers want their pupils to get to the shortest and the most efficient way. I don't want to mess up with all that. We really need it. Or let's say it makes us better for our analytical thinking, what we need all the time. But anyway, it has a poisonous side effect. It kills our creativity. We just get used to think like a robot. And robots are really much creative from my experience. So let's have a look how artists think instead. Well, artists are also able to think in this analytical way. I am an artist, but I visited a higher technical college. I'm used to think like a robot, but let's say it in an analytic way. Artists are able to solve mathematical problems as well. They also need it in their lives. They have to pay their bills, they have even to write bills maybe, whatever they do. But let's have a look what an artist would think with that same exactly mathematics example I showed you before. 3 children, 6 apples and so on. Well, the artist would also see the obvious solution of dividing 6 apples through 3 children, and he would get to the same result. But he would see amazingly much more than just that. For the analytical way of thinking, here's just the number of children and the number of apples of interest. But an artist would maybe engage also with other questions. Which colors do the apples have? Do the children like to eat apples at all? And maybe one of them is a baby and isn't able to eat apples. And what about the parents? Don't they eat apples? And what is with the neighbor? I mean, they got the tree from him. Shouldn't they give him 1 apple at least? Why did he give the tree to them at all? We don't know it, and this doesn't help us to solve the maths example. But these are questions an artist would maybe engage with. So what is going on here, and how does this help the artist? Well, the artist is able to solve the maths example too, but it is boring, isn't it? I mean, who the hell wants to divide apples? And so he thinks in a creative way as well. What he does is simply, he doesn't see just a way of finding this one result only. He stays open for everything. The result is not a constant for the artist. He's open for each kind of result. The goal of the artist is to create something new. This is one of the base requirements for getting a piece of art. And this is not possible with an analytic thinking. Analytic thinking just has place for one starting point and one goal. In art, the number of goals is unlimited. And even the number of starting points, by the way, it is amazing. And this here is your little world. You can do whatever you want. And finally, while there is only one right answer in analytic thinking, in creative thinking there doesn't exist something like a right or wrong. It just is how it is. There even doesn't exist something like a good and bad. It is how it is. And finally, from the viewer side, the one who looks at the photograph finally, it is just a question of taste, if he likes the art of the artist or not. Or if he appreciates what the artist does or not. Or if he understands what the artist does or not. I personally even don't want to compare different artists by how good they are. Art is always good. It is art. The question is just if the viewer is compatible with it. And to be honest, this is also not the goal of art. This would be an analytic goal. It could be the goal of the business behind your art maybe. But this is not the sense of art. The sense of art is to create something new, and there is no right or wrong. And by the way, just quickly, it is quite funny when I hear or read a hater in a social network who is pulling the photograph of anyone apart. Something like, how you didn't use the gold ratio there, or there's no foreground interest, and what is also often to hear, there is no clear subject in your composition, or learn the rules of photography before you post here. Yeah, things like that. And people who are reacting like that are simply not used to think in this way, the creative way. They try to hold on the analytic thinking. They think there is a right and wrong, like it is in the most cases in our lives. But this is simply not the case in art. And the problem is we have all learned and we got all drilled to think in an analytical way up from our childhood. So what can we do to overcome this creative obstacle of analytic thinking? It is quite interesting. Have you ever observed a little child between 3 or 6 years or something like that? How it engages with things, and if you have children, I'm sure you have. It is thinking exactly in that creative way. It asks questions like, why is the snow white? Or why is the sky blue? And lots of questions as well, where it's really hard to find answers. The little child doesn't need all this information in that moment when it asks to solve any analytical problem. It is just interesting. And this is the best basis for art. The child absorbs each information it could get. It is excited to learn. And then I think to remember on that day when I came to ground school, my dad said something like, "Son, today the serious side of life starts for you. The serious side of life." It was really something like that. And oh man, he was so right. And this is the time where we simply start to divide apples. So how can we find back this creative way of thinking? And it's interesting, I often hear people saying something like, "I'm not a creative person," something like that. That's wrong. It is inside you. It is inside us all. You have been even a master of creativity before you started to divide apples. And it is even the nature of human being to think in a creative way. We have just learned really successfully to suppress it. Stop to suppress your creativity. And the trick is to activate your creative way of thinking and to get used to it again. And let me be honest, it is not enough when you just try to be creative when you're out for photography. Activate your creativity every day for at least a few minutes, maybe multiple times a day. We have a creative and an analytic side of our brains. I always exchange these two. I think that the right one is the creative and the left one the analytic one, something like that. And the thing is, it is difficult to use them simultaneously, or I think it's even not possible. I think to get more creative, you just have to activate your creative side as often as possible. And the easiest way, therefore, is, and this is what athletes do in top sports, by the way. They do all the daily things in a different way. Just let me give you an example. When a little child tries to clean its teeth for the first time, it does quite hard with that. But as an adult, you usually don't think about that while you're doing it because it's normal, and I think I could clean my teeth while I'm sleeping or something like that. And the reason therefore is we have learned to think efficiently. You remember mathematics at school? Right is not right enough. We have to get efficient. And the procedure of cleaning your teeth is deep saved in your brain. So what you can do is to activate this creative side. Exchange your hands when you're cleaning your teeth. If you usually brush with your right hand, take your left one. And you need to get your creative side of the brain to fulfill this task of cleaning your teeth in that case. This might sound totally crazy, but this really helps to activate your creativity. You could also try to stand on just one leg while you clean your teeth with the other hand to make it even more difficult. The goal is then not only to clean your teeth, but also not to fall. And you remember, the number of goals is unlimited in creative thinking. Also, binding your shoes with exchanged hands works fantastically. The result is maybe not as good as usually, but it activates your creative side of the brain. And of course, asking questions to yourself when you try to solve an analytical problem, I think this is even the strongest method, to be honest. So don't just divide apples. Ask for their color, for the sort of apples, if the children like to eat them at all. This really helps you to activate your creative thinking. But how can we bring this all into our photography? I will tell you exactly what you can do. But before I will do this, my friends, if you like this video, I would really appreciate if you could give me a thumb up. It helps me, it helps the algorithm, and it helps also other photographers out there to find this video better on YouTube. Thank you therefore. Well, now we know how an artist thinks. We know how to activate creative thinking, but how can we get really creative when we are out in the field, because that is what we finally all want, right? Going home with a masterpiece. Well, the most important thing is to know, or these are even two important things to be honest. First of all, it takes a while to get into a creative flow. In my experience, something between 5 minutes and half an hour, something like that. And this is different for me, it depends on the day. And the second thing we have to consider is, whenever we start to think in an analytical way while we are in a creative phase, it kills our creative flow. It takes some minutes to get into creative flow, and the second is, it kills our creative flow when we think analytically while we are creative. And this is important. And now guess, what makes photography that difficult? On the one hand, we have to know which aperture we have to choose, where we have to focus, how we have to focus, how we have to expose right, and all that absolutely analytic stuff. This side of the brain here, no, this one. And on the other hand, we want to get creative. We want to get a masterpiece. So how can we bring these two things together? Whenever we think analytically, it destroys my creative flow. And the way that works really fantastically for me is, I simply keep my camera in my bag and just enjoy the scenery. I get creative. I don't have a clear goal. Sometimes I even don't have a clear starting point. But finally, maybe I find a story and maybe I allow myself even a healthy amount of craziness here. I am not interested in consequences, what others could think about me, or if others would like the photograph what I'm photographing here, or maybe if I get hate maybe when I post it on social networks. That's all not important. I even don't think about a clear composition on that point. I don't ask myself any analytical questions. I just let it happen. No analytic thoughts, and when I have decided for my creative story, I build up a composition. I think about how can I achieve what I'm going for. I have a starting point now and also a rough goal as well. My analytical thinking starts here, as we have all learned it at school, where the serious side of life started. And again, it is really an advantage that the creative process is finished at that point already before we think in an analytical way about our camera, about our settings and so on. Otherwise you could struggle to find your creative phase again. I mean, there are exceptions of course. It could happen that we have react quickly to the light or something like that. But also in this case, you have definitely an advantage when you go into setup early enough so that you have enough time to get into a creative phase again in such a case. And changing your camera settings short before you expose them should not be the biggest problem, I think. You see, artists are able to think in the same analytical way like everyone does, but additionally to that, we have unlimited possibilities. There is no right or wrong. It is just how it is. It could be that non-artists have a problem with this way of thinking because they are simply not used to thinking that way. They just think like that or something like that, and the serious side of life. It could be that you get a crazy reaction like artists are gaga or something like that. It is totally up to you if you show others how you think or if you hide this for yourself or for people who are artists like you maybe. But my personal opinion is I stand to that what I am, and if I should ever meet this girl at the doctor's again, I think I would tell her that I'm a photography artist. And there are a couple of things you have to consider if you want to bring your photography to art, obviously. It is not difficult. It is much easier than most would think, and if you're interested about that, watch this video here. If you like this, give me a thumb up, and thank you so much for watching. Stop dividing apples, and see you next Saturday. Bye.
I'm the landscape you need to see. You are the artist I'll never be.